Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. So today is your World War III update for the week. Before we get started, I want to thank all of you who support this channel in whatever way you support it, through your thumbs up, your comments, your subscription, your donations through PayPal, Patreon, and Cash App, and through my P.O. Box. Thanks to all of you who keep this channel running. If I had to work a full-time job, I would be uninformed and unable to do this. And so thank you for giving me the time and purchasing that time for me through your donations so that I can actually do all the difficult research it takes to produce a channel and produce content on a regular basis. So thanks to all of you. If you'd like to join in contributing, I don't have a big operation here. I'm a one-man show. And your financial contributions just go to provide for me the basics and the necessities of a basic existence in my little cabin in the woods. So, we just had this big debate where Biden dropped the ball. Biden showed his true colors. Since then, he spent all of his time trying to undo the disastrous debate. And it just seems like he digs his hole deeper. As many in the Democratic Party, even in mainstream media, even in MSNBC talking heads, are calling for Biden to potentially step down from the presidential race. He has doubled down on how he is not going to step down, and in an interview yesterday said if God himself came down in person and told him to step aside, then he might. But that ain't going to happen. So we're going to have a Biden-Trump election. I used to think, right up until recently, that we wouldn't even have an election because I thought that Donald Trump would be arrested and put in prison over that conviction in New York on the fraud case. But the sentencing has been sent back from July 11th into September sometime because of the Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity. And with leftists calling for Biden to use that same presidential immunity to quote-unquote drone strike you-know-who, Mr. T-Man, and put an end to this, people are saying things like this on the internet, that this Supreme Court ruling is giving Biden now the opportunity to just become a total tyrant and to take out Donald Trump in some kind of military move. Now, having said that, this is coming from the party who is trying to save democracy. Yeah, let's save democracy by becoming totalitarian dictators and murderous thugs. Yeah, that's how you save democracy. It doesn't make sense. But with all this going on the domestic front, we seem to be asleep at the wheel and missing what's going on in the global theater, okay? So we've got World War III looming. It hasn't gone anywhere. Just because we're distracted by the debates, we're distracted by the politics in the United States, the World War III threat just keeps thickening. There is competing reports that we may have had one of our drones shot down over the Black Sea by Russia. I think our side's denying it. Russians saying they did it. So that's an area which is it has little to do with Ukraine, right? That's the back door to Russia. And we've got, Russian targets being hit by Ukrainian forces operating United States weapons with the help of United States servicemen. We've crossed over every red line that Putin has placed before us. The war in Israel is growing and gaining momentum. I said, really back on October 8th, that Israel was going to use what happened on October 7th to clear out Gaza, and when they were done with Gaza, they were going to turn their attention to the West Bank. We see that happening now. We see Israel doubling down on annexing the West Bank, and we're hearing rumblings of potentially going into the West Bank after insurgents and terrorists, they say, are hiding in the West Bank of Palestine. And then I said once they got that kind of underway, if Hezbollah doesn't escalate, they're going to move north into Lebanon. All of this is starting to play out. All this stuff I predicted is starting to play out. And now we're even hearing rumblings and rumors and some leaked information from inside Israel that if Iran decides to get involved, Israel intends to use a nuclear first strike against Iran. And the weapon that they're talking about using is a neutron bomb. When I heard that this morning, it really perked me up, because about 2 months ago, and maybe I mentioned this on the channel, maybe I didn't. I intended to, but I might have got sidetracked by other events. But about 2 months ago, God woke me up in the middle of the night, and he said, President tests new trombone. You're like, what? Trombone? This was God reminding me of a misunderstanding I had as a young child. As a little kid, I had a paper route. In our paper route, we didn't roll our newspapers. We had them lined up, fold up in the front of the carrier on my bicycle, like a big bag. And when I delivered a few, I could see the headline, the big headline of the front page of the newspaper, and I would read it upside down while I'm pedaling my bicycle. And I remember one day looking down there, and it says, President Carter test his new trombone. And I was like, why does President Carter have a trombone? Why would he test it? And who cares? And I remember pedaling along, just puzzled as to why they're talking about a trombone. And then when I get to the next stop to deliver a paper, I take it out to deliver it, and I turn it over and read it upright. And it says, President Carter tests neutron bomb. So what is a neutron bomb? What makes it different than a hydrogen bomb? What makes it different from your standard nuclear bomb? And what's the history on the neutron bomb? Because God brought this to my attention 2 or 3 months ago in my sleep. I woke up with this memory, and God telling me that the neutron bomb is going to be in the headlines soon. Could Israel use a neutron bomb against Iran? What is a neutron bomb? A neutron bomb is a bomb that is, originally we developed it to use against Russian tanks, but on the battlefield. So it's kind of a battlefield nuke. The Russians immediately figured out a way to line their tanks so that the neutron radiation couldn't penetrate their tanks. And we kind of scrapped the neutron bomb. We have a few of them around that we could utilize for a personnel barrier. What is that? That's where you nuke a particular area in the battlefield to prevent anybody from going into that, because it remains poisonous. So the opposite of a low-yield battlefield nuke is a neutron bomb. A neutron bomb is a heavily radioactive bomb that does very little to destroy infrastructure. Yes, it has explosive properties, but its main intent is to intensely irradiate a certain area in the battlefield to prevent infantry from being able to cross that barrier. So it's an anti-personnel weapon to be used on the battlefield. And I think because we scrapped it, we never considered that Russia might be stockpiling neutron bombs to use against us. But we never thought about that, I guess. But we never really tried to make our tanks neutron radioactive poison repellent. Whereas the Russians can take their tanks right through one of those anti-personnel barriers from a neutron detonation and travel right through, and the people inside the tank will be perfectly fine. Whereas the Americans were more concerned with hydrogen bombs and protecting against the big bombs, the ones we worry about, the big nukes. And so they instead, America insulated their tanks against a hydrogen bomb, against a standard nuclear detonation, by using depleted uranium. So they put depleted uranium into the armor of our modern tanks to protect us, or troops rather, against these hydrogen bomb nuclear poisons, the radioactive poisons that come from those bombs. But what they did, and I don't know if they didn't think about it or they just gambled and rolled the dice, but American tanks with depleted uranium in their armor are very susceptible to neutron radiation. The neutron radiation will penetrate the depleted uranium and reactivate it, causing the entire tank to become a nuclear radioactive poison vessel. So if they take an American tank through a neutron bomb field, everybody in the tank will be irradiated immediately because of the depleted uranium. So this is some research I did a couple months ago after God woke me up to this. And now we're hearing that the neutron bomb may be in the news because the Israelis are considering that to be the weapon of choice against Iran, where they poison a whole lot of people, potentially taking out many Iranian troops and advisors and what they call terrorists, without necessarily destroying the infrastructure. The other benefit of a neutron bomb is that because it's a lower explosive yield, it tends to keep the neutron radiation in a very specific area. It doesn't cause this big ground burst cloud that goes up into the sky and spreads it everywhere. It keeps it isolated. Remember, it's designed to put up a barrier to stop troops from going through, not to poison the entire battlefield, right? So it's a very precise weapon. And so this is the weapon that they're talking about using against Iran, which would allow them to nuke a particular area without doing a lot of damage to the surrounding area or catching winds that might carry radiation to other non-combative areas or even backlash back onto Israel. That's one of the reasons they outfitted themselves with these types of weapons. And even though they deny they don't have them, we all know they do, right? Everybody knows they do. It's a denial that nobody actually is expected to believe, right? But nonetheless, one of the reasons we outfitted them with neutron bombs, or they outfitted themselves with neutron bombs, is because everything's so tight in the Middle East. If they don't want to nuke themselves when they nuke somebody else, so the neutron bomb was the way to go. And so that begs the big question, is Israel planning to do a preemptive first strike, nuclear strike, with a neutron bomb, a neutron bone? Are they going to blast that neutron bone over there at Iran? That's a possibility. With them talking about nuclear first strike possibilities, it reminds me that Putin recently changed their nuclear doctrine to include a first strike capability. He removed the standing doctrine that said we will only fire nukes if nukes are fired at us, and they put on the table the possibility of a preemptive strike against their enemies. And recently Trump came out and said that might have to be the new American nuclear doctrine too, to bring back the ideology and concept of a nuclear first strike. We ruled that out a long time ago because of nuclear submarines. Nuclear submarines make sure that whoever strikes first, the subs will strike last, and it causes this what they call mutual assured destruction. And so we have taken the first strike possibilities off the table because we know if we hit the Russians first, they're going to hit us back with their nuclear submarine arsenal. That there's really no way to take out the enemy without them hitting us back hard. But that begs the question, can limited nuclear war happen? Can we do a tit for tat? Can we or they or them or us send one nuclear device in and then not expect a full retaliatory strike from the other side? And I think that's the question, is can we have limited use of nuclear weapons without triggering mutual destruction? And the answer seems to be yes on every side. This is why Trump is saying we might consider first strike doctrine again, and Putin has said we might consider that we're considering first strike doctrine again, and why Israel is considering using this neutron bomb against Iran at some point if a conflict arises. So in this debate that we recently had between Biden and Trump, where Biden, showed what a mess he is, what a wreck he is, Trump said something interesting. He said that he could end the Ukraine war in one day. So how would Trump end the Ukraine war in one day? That statement puzzles everyone involved. Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, said, "Mr. Trump, if you can end that in one day, how are you going to do that? What does that mean? How is that possible?" So let's look at the possibilities of how Donald Trump could end the war in Ukraine in one day. Well, first thing he could do is just accept the terms of Putin's recent peace proposal, which is to give up all of the western sections of Ukraine to Russia, allowing them to annex Ukraine, that the Ukrainian army would be demilitarized, and that they would make a pledge to never join NATO, and all of the NATO weapons, all of the U.S. weapons in Ukraine would be removed immediately. That's the only way you end this in one day. You just go, okay, Putin, whatever you want. I don't think that's what Donald Trump intends to do. So what's some other options? For one thing, if he wanted to accept Putin's terms, he's got to get the Ukrainian government, the rest of NATO, all of the EU countries to agree to such a thing, and they never would. They're not going to. So here's one possible way. You could tell Zelensky, if you're Trump, you tell Zelensky, if you don't come to the peace table right now and agree to compromise with Russia on the territory already in question, then we're going to pull all of our support from you and pull out all our weapons, and you're going to be overran by Russia. Because without our help, you're overrun by Russia in a day without our help. That would force Zelensky to the table, right? Biden would never do this, but Trump might. Trump might just bluff and say, we're going to pull every bit of support back. If you don't put a stop to this war right now, you're going to have to negotiate. Then he goes to Putin and says, Putin, you can't have everything you want. If you don't come to the table and compromise with Zelensky, if you guys don't work this out to put an end to the bloodshed, then we're going to flood Ukraine with NATO troops. We're going to unleash bombs on all of eastern Ukraine. If you don't come to the table, it's on like Donkey Kong, and this war starts right now. The choice is yours. And he gets both of them to come to the table and make a compromise. I think that's going to take longer than a day, but you know Donald Trump tends to exaggerate a little bit. And he did say he could get it done before he would even take office, that he could get this done. And it does remind me of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan came to the presidency in the middle of the Iranian hostage crisis, when Iran first went from being a westernized nation to being taken over by radical Islam and the Ayatollah Khomeini. They took our embassy by force, and they held, I don't know, 87 hostages. I'm guessing. I don't remember exactly. That seems about right. They had a bunch of American hostages. And Carter had done nothing about it. President Carter had done nothing about it. He tried a Delta Force rescue operation, but the helicopters ran into a sandstorm and crashed, and it was a big debacle, and some Americans died, and we never made it over there. They died. They crashed on the way. And so Reagan told the Ayatollah and the people of Iran that when I become president, the minute I put my hand on that Bible and take that oath, as soon as I walk away, if you have not released our people, we're declaring war on Iran, and the bombers will be leaving within 10 minutes of me putting my hand on that Bible. So when my hand goes on that Bible, you better have released the hostages. And lo and behold, if they didn't announce that they were releasing the hostages on the day of the inauguration, and before Trump, get me wrong, before Reagan put his hand on that Bible and took the oath of office, they had announced that the American hostages were safely back in Germany. So is that a possibility, that Donald Trump could make such a powerful threat against Russia, that they would come to the table and work it out, make such a powerful threat against Ukraine, saying that we will pull all support and you will be on your own against Russia if you don't come to the table? See, they're both stubborn. Neither side wants to give up. How do I think it's going to go down? I think that that's probably how it's going to go down. And that what will end up happening is Ukraine will get split. And portions of it, the Donbass region for sure, will be ceded to Russia. And I don't see how we cannot capitulate to Putin's demands that Ukraine never be part of NATO. There is another possibility that would cover that Like, we don't have to deny Ukraine access to NATO because Donald Trump could just pull the United States out of NATO. I personally think that mutual defense agreement we have is ridiculous. Why should we get in a war with Russia because some little state has a problem with Russia, and we got to go to war with Russia because they get in an ego contest with Putin at some point? So I'm not in favor of NATO, and Donald Trump is not a big fan of NATO and has threatened to pull us out of NATO in the past. So maybe that's one of the ways he might end the war in one day, is just by pulling the United States completely out of the NATO agreement and putting an end to NATO, because NATO's nothing without the teeth of the United States military behind it. So he might not fear NATO if the United States pulls out of NATO. I don't know. Tell me what you think. How can Donald Trump end the war in one day in Ukraine? Will the Israelis use a neutron bomb against their enemies in Iran? Will neutron bombs become a part of modern combat? The use of them against our tanks is obvious because of the depleted uranium defenses that we have makes us susceptible to the neutron bomb. Did Russia scrap their neutron bomb projects like we did and relegate it to a weapon they keep in the back of the warehouse? Or do they have active plans to utilize this weapon on the battlefield, just like Israel is making plans to utilize this against their enemies? Tell me what you think in the comments section below. And we'll see you tomorrow for my sermon. And I want to thank all of you who support this channel. And we'll see you next time on the end of the world as we know it. Do you feel fine?